Hello, everyone. Welcome to the weekly show of Classroom Without Walls. My name is I am the CEO of Classroom Without Walls and the host of this weekly live streaming show. On this show, I interview leading social media, digital marketers, content creators to share their best practices so that we can future-proof our business. Today, I am so humbled. I'm so honored and I'm so excited to have my dear friend Miri Rodriguez on the show to talk about storytelling and her amazing book.
Yes.
So our discussion is going to be based on her book. She, for those of you who don't know who is Miri, she is the global head of internships at Microsoft. She's also a globally recognized storyteller. And she's also an author. Again, this amazing book. And she's also an Adobe Insider, where I really had a chance to get to know her. What an amazing woman she is. So we're all in for a treat. We're going to talk about her book, storytelling, personal branding, and how can we even apply design thinking to storytelling, and what are the essential ingredients of building a strong personal brand. We're going to dive into her journey and how she has applied all of those things to build a professional online presence for herself. So I'm really excited for today's conversation. And as always, a big shout out to StreamYard for being a sponsor of Classroom Without Walls. In the comment section, there is a link for you to check out StreamYard for free for 2 weeks. I love StreamYard. They are so easy to use. The best platform to go live on social media. And we are live on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on YouTube, on Twitter, and we are also live on Amazon.
Woo! That's awesome. Good for you, AI. That's
I'm
awesome.
so excited. I have actually just became an Amazon influencer. And recently I have been upgraded to Amazon Insider. So if you are watching us live on Amazon, and you can just enter Classroom Without Walls .live, and you will catch us live on Amazon, and you will see that there is a store where you can get a copy of Miri's book. Anyway, that is a long introduction. Without any further ado, my friend, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. We've connected, as you said before, and just getting to know you has been incredible. The work that you're doing with Classroom Without Walls is just so remarkable. So I'm the one who's honored to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. So much to talk about. So to kick off today's discussion, I love following you on social media. Even when I was promoting the show, everyone was like, oh, Miri, she's so authentic. Everyone, I can really show you people's comments. Everyone just loves you. So I want to ask you, what inspired you to become a storyteller, to become interested in storytelling in the very first place? Given that you are kind of in the technology, Microsoft, in the tech space, a little bit counterintuitive for those people to be really into storytelling, digital marketing. So what inspired you to become a storyteller in the first place?
Yeah. This role of storyteller didn't exist per se, especially in the industry and technology. It was definitely a momentum thing where as industry began to rethink, as we began to build new technologies in the digital age, moving things to the cloud, it was immediately important to think through how we were going to remain human in that connection when machines were taking over immediately, right? We're seeing that integration of technology. And so it was a movement, you would say, in the industry. For me, it was that taking that chance and that momentum. I was actually a community manager at Microsoft for Twitter, Facebook, and forums on the support side. And then I applied. This job came up. There was a storytelling job in engineering, of all places. And my job was to go tell stories of how we were digitally transforming in Microsoft. And so it was a daunting task, to say the least. But I took the challenge because I was intrigued about what that would look like. I learned that just because I was a communicator, I had a marketing background, that doesn't make you a storyteller at all. And I was wrong thinking that I was qualified to come and do this job. And I was stumped. It was a huge learning lesson for me, which is actually what the book is about. It's what I learned there, not what not to do, and then what to do.
Yes, yeah. So can you share some of those, mistakes that you have learned, what not to do when it comes to, like, if you don't mind?
Of course, no, I'm here to share that. Of course, the mistake was assuming, right? I assumed that I knew and that I had enough knowledge to tell stories. I assumed that storytelling was to tell stories, was telling stories only. It was the mere telling of stories. And I found immediately that there's so much more depth and layers and intersectionality to storytelling. I found with a very niche audience, which this audience obviously was technical. Hi, good to see you. It was this idea that I needed to understand them deeper. I needed to empathize with them. And I'm not an empath. I'm not personally an empath. It's not part of my personality. And so I had to learn to become an empath. Nobody was talking about this. It wasn't like today, that's the word, lead with empathy. Back then, that was not a thing. So I had to go find out what that looked like and actually learn. I learned that there were 3 levels of empathy. I learned, that you can practice empathy. And so I began that journey. It was first my own journey, and then it just kind of, began to trickle down into storytelling.
Wow, that is so exciting. And we're definitely going to dive deeper into your stories. And so before we do that, I want to quickly share my screen to show you guys, if you join us live on Amazon, where you can actually see a copy of Miri's incredible book. Wow. So here we're also live on Amazon. You can see that here there is a store. And so the very first book being highlighted is Miri's book. I highly recommend that you click on it, check it out. It is such a great book. To join us live on Amazon, just enter in the search bar classroomwithoutwalls.ai. So that's how you join us on Amazon Live. We have more than 20, almost 30 people live with us right now.
Oh, thank you. That's amazing.
Thank you so much, everyone. Yeah. So before we dive deeper into the storytelling part, you also have this incredible, really unique definition regarding personal branding and branding. Because I have read hundreds of definitions, but I love yours the most. So can you please share with us, how do you define like a brand? What does a brand mean to you?
Yeah, I often say that a personal brand is not who you say you are, but how you make people feel. And I learned that also the hard way in my own trajectory of building my brand slowly but surely, making mistakes, many mistakes along the way. I've gone to Twitter jail. I actually went to Twitter jail last week. I did. They locked me for 12 hours. I was like, what did I do? So we're learning as we go. If anybody says and calls themselves a social media guru, definitely that is not true. We continue to learn platforms and algorithms and new technologies that exist. So in this journey, I learned that, a lot of personal brand, when you hear that personal brand idea, people think professional brand. They think LinkedIn profile or resume or how I show up at work. Really, for me, it's been showing all of who you are. We are not just the workers. We're mothers, we're sisters, we're brothers, we're siblings, we're spouses, we're partners, we're dog owners, all these other layers of who we are. And so I began to explore those layers and showcase those on social media. And I realized that the promise that we make in a personal brand is making people feel something. So I'm hoping whoever's watching live, we're making you feel good right now and you're learning something, insights and thought leadership, all these things that we create. Nobody has your lived experience, right? You have such a remarkable story yourself. Nobody else has that. And so I have mine, you have yours. That is the brand. It's the story behind that lived experiences and those insights. It's how we make people feel.
I love it. I think that feeling part is like people kind of ignore it, especially I feel in the technology space, because like we are very detached from like customers, from like the feeling part. We feel like it's too woo to talk about, it's too soft.
That's right.
So you have identified, 5 specific elements when it comes to brand. And so including mission, attributes, character, story, and SEO.
That's
and
right.
Can you please briefly explain each of the 5 elements? Because I never really thought about branding in such a clear manner. So please explain. And also share with us, how did those like elements came to you? Was that like one day you woke up like, here are the key ingredients of building a brand. So share that with us.
It was a completely like 9 years in the making. So, it's all
Wow.
my own journey of, again, making mistakes and learning along the way. I definitely, a brand has to have mission. We know this from a marketing perspective. We know this from a corporate branding perspective. Every brand has a mission. And so you have to have yours. Don't wait, to give, don't wait for somebody else to give you purpose or tell you what that purpose is. You give it to yourself. You really have to sit down and decide that for yourself. And that's a hard thing to do. I'm not diminishing. It's been years in the making for me, but you have to give yourself purpose. Why do you want to, what is it that you want to go do for the world? How do you want to immortalize yourself? We all want to leave a mark. What is that mark going to be? So that's important. I actually have a mission statement that I created for myself. I believe everyone should have their own mission statement, just like a brand has a mission statement, right? So that's important. When you think about attributes, so there's character and there's attributes. Those two things are about your core values, and that's how you're going to show up. You decide that. So we all have personality. We have personality traits. We have strengths. We have, history. We have lived experience. All these things become part of that brand that you are. When you think about people that you admire that have a strong brand, a strong presence, for example, they have decided how to show up, right? So mine, for example, attributes that I call out are feminine and kind. So, I have to look feminine and kind on purpose. I have to write feminine and kind on purpose. Those are my attributes. I've decided those. They're for me overarching. So there's more than two, but for me, it's like, it's a gauging, right? It's a temperature gauge. I'm like, okay, is my email on brand? Is it feminine and kind? Am I showing up today feminine and kind? So it's all of that. It's my hair, it's how I show up, it's where I show up. So that's branding. You decide those attributes as well as the character. The character is your values. Values, we've created our values sometimes unintentionally, like, culture, our parents, our religion, if we follow that. Those are all things that have instilled in us some of those core values. But have you stopped to think if they serve you today? Have you stopped to think, what are your own? Like, it's not just because you inherited them at some point in your life. What are your core values that you're going to go do business in life with? Those are yours, and you decide. So that's values, character. When you think about SEO, incredible, because I always say, you are the CEO of your SEO. SEO is really your digital presence. We live today in the digital space. And so we're a global brand, and we're a digital brand. If you Google yourself today and you don't find yourself, that's a problem. Go find out what's out there, who's talking about you. You have to own that space. That's your space. It's your name attached. It's your photos attached, and you have that. You have that ability to do that. It's yours. And so think about that as well. I think I missed one. Did I miss one?
I think you missed story. Did you?
Oh, sorry. Of course, story. I mean, I'm the storytelling, of course. And so your story. We all have story, right? All of us have a story. I once interviewed a two-time Emmy winner journalist, and she said something remarkable. She said, I really believe everyone should write a book with their own story. And I thought, really? You think everybody should write a book? And she said, yeah, because we are all living and experiencing everything differently. The learnings that we would have from each other would be remarkable. Think about, what if we all wrote 2020? What if all of us would have sat there and wrote every day of what happened in 2020? We all experienced a global pandemic, and we're impacted at different levels, and we have learned different things just from our own lived experiences. That's story, right? So we all have an insight, a lived experience that nobody else gets. And if we share that, that is what connects us. That is what makes us human. That's what makes the brand authentic as well.
I absolutely love those 5 elements, even though you kind of went through them quickly. I'm sure, as you mentioned, it took you 9 years to develop them. So I have a great question, who is kind of in the technology, technical space. So Dan, thank you for joining us live. He said that he's a data scientist, and applying user story first focus is something that he didn't even discover until recently in his career, and he wished that he had more training in this. And way too many data people focus only on the technology side, and they totally ignore the people, like this side. So for those people who are in not the creative side, who are in technology, and can you give us give those people some tips where they can even apply this, the 5 elements? How do they even get started to discover their story? I mean, it took me quite some time. You mentioned that everyone has a story. But sometimes we just really? Do I even have a story? Where
Yeah.
do I even get started to come, to develop this art?
Yeah. Yeah, I call it actually the origin story. It's that
Mm,
simple. So I appreciate that comment because, a lot of my audience is actually in the tech industry. So I do get this question a lot. And I don't want to diminish the power of the technology. I understand that people working with data, the research and the technology and the user experience they deliver is so powerful. And so sometimes it just becomes overwhelming because you don't know how to detach
mm,
who you are from that delivery, because it's so much a part of you. It's important to really start with you, right? So what
mm,
is your origin story? I often ask my people that I'm mentor, coach, people that I coach, that to really just start with a blank piece of paper and start with the day you were born. That's one dot. That's talk about data. Create a data point, and begin to build from there memories, core memories since you were a child, moments, people that impacted you. Just and it's just blank. I mean, just don't think about it much. Just let your brain flow
mm.
on that story that was written, and you probably were not intentional to write, but that you can take that information and that data and I'll turn it into something into the next chapters of your life. Create databases. So that's one. Origin story is a database. Another one is asking people how you show up. I said earlier that brand is it's how you make people feel. So create a survey, an anonymous survey online, and ask people, hey, how do I show up? How do I make you feel when I walk in or when I write an email or connect with you? And that's data. People are going to begin to give you that answer as well. Do it with people that you love, though, and that love you and want to see you win, not just everybody, because you're going to find a bunch of haters out there too. So just be selective about your audience. And so create as much data. Get personality tests done. There's a bunch of free personality tests online. 16 personalities is one.
Mm.
Myers-Briggs. 16 personalities. You have love language is another one. There's so many different ones. And tag me if you want more resources, but just create that database of who you are today and then examine it and be like, hey, if this is my database, where do I go from here? With my strengths, with my lived experiences, with people that I impact today, my space, where I work, where I play, all of these things are data points where you can look at it and go, okay, where do I go from here? And then begin
Mm.
to actually define that mission. I found in my own story, I had impacted and I had a potential to impact young women in tech because I
Mm.
didn't have mentors and I didn't have people that took me in, women, when I first started in this industry. So with my own story, I was like, okay, I can go be someone who I needed in that moment. And so I began to actually coach young women in tech, and that became my audience. That is still my audience, by the way.
Yeah, I love this. I also love, I shared in the beginning. By the way, I have some really great comments. So Natalie, thank you for joining us live. I love this quote myself. You are the CEO of your ICO. That should be on a t-shirt, my friend. I absolutely love it.
Let's do
Right?
it. Let's do a t-shirt.
Yeah, and we should all write a book, just like we should
Mhm.
all share our stories because our
Yes.
books and our stories can really inspire some other people. And there are so many reasons that people love you, Miri. And one of the reasons is that, at least personally speaking, you are
Mhm.
so authentic. I remember you mentioned in so many interviews and talks that you did, that you even shared when you just joined Microsoft, you were being
Yeah.
bullied. So
Yeah.
was that experience a part of where you kind of developed your story, you developed your brand? Do you mind sharing that with us?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's when it incited me, this idea of building my brand. I had just
Mm,
arrived, fresh at Microsoft. I was recruited. So I think it was also part of my own monsters, my self,
mm,
defeat, my own imposter syndrome talking to me. I never applied because I didn't think I could ever get a job at a place like Microsoft. I just didn't think I belonged. So I came in with that already in my head. Like, do I really belong here? I had that doubt about
mm,
myself. And then coming in, I did encounter a few women within my organization who actually bullied me for a year. And that was tough because I just didn't know. I was confused. I didn't know if that was like the culture of the company or the organization. I didn't know if this was a targeted approach. It ended up most definitely being a targeted approach. And so as I navigated those 12 months, it was just, at the end, I was just like, okay, I've given it a year. I don't think I can do this anymore. And, I was ready to quit. A PM actually just kind of pulled me aside and he's like, Miri, you can't quit. You need to be here. Microsoft needs you. And I was like, Microsoft doesn't need me. How doesn't need me? And he just, he spoke sense into me and said, just go home and think about it. And that's when I was like, well, if Microsoft needs me, how? Like, what am I going to go do there beyond my job? Like, what is the purpose? And then I realized, oh, baby. And then I realized that we all need to define that for ourselves, our own purpose. And so I came back with purpose. I came back and said, you know what? Maybe this is happening to other people. To other women. And sure it was. I mean, of course it was. And so I became, someone who they could talk to. We were not alone. We were in it together. And so it became that community. First it was one-on-one, and now it's global. And that became my purpose. So use those stories where you think, that's not a great story. I didn't go to the moon, right? I mean, it's not an accomplishment story. I got bullied. Nobody wants to tell that story. But it was the one catalyst for me to be something or do something. And it's the one thing that became the purpose that I gave myself. So do that. Look back at those stories and go, what have I learned here? How much have I grown? What evolution, what learnings, what lessons can I teach someone else? Is someone else possibly going through something like this? Can I share this with them? And we can all learn. I'm personally actually, there's always stuff happening, right? Like life. And I always contend with that. How much do we share so that other people can learn? That's leaving the mark, and we're always so scared about being vulnerable, yet we actually admire people that are vulnerable. So it's almost like a juxtaposition. And I think the more vulnerable we get, the better we get at being human and teaching others from our own perspective.
Well, I love that. I love this comment from LinkedIn user. Like, talents often get bullied. I agree. And because you are different, you are speaking the truth, you are unique. And like, at least in my case, when I decided to leave academia and I was talking about the problems in education, I got bullied badly by a friend, which is like, you feel really hard if this happens.
Well, not really a friend then. That was not really a friend.
Exactly, quotation. So like, you talked about that, but we also know, as business owners, entrepreneurs, we have quite a few people here are business owners, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. And to run our business, we need that, we call it, authority. Yeah. So how has being vulnerable affected, if at all, your authority? Do you ever feel or worried about that? Well, if I show up authentically, vulnerably, will that affect my authority to run my brand, to run my business? Or like, where do you draw the line between being vulnerable and actually also show up as like an authority figure? Because like in my case, I'm an entrepreneur. I run my own business. I have clients watching me all the time. I have like students watching me all the time. So like, share that with us. How do you approach this?
Yeah, with storytelling, right? And storytelling with design thinking specifically, I learned to leverage the design thinking process to begin to test content with my audiences. I built my audience. My audience was these young women in tech. So that's my niche audience. And it began to grow, not organically. And I began to test content. So design thinking has 5 phases, 5 steps. The first one is to empathize, typically empathizing with your audience, getting to know them enough to understand what motivates them, what inspires them. You define, so there it is. Define, you're thinking about your story characters, who they are, again, what happens to them, who you are in that story, what happens to you. Ideation is the other one. So you're thinking about how many concepts of stories, this is brainstorming basically, ideas of how can the content land better? How vulnerable do I get? That's ideation. Then you begin to prototype. You can say, hey, I'm going to do a video. I'm going to do, an article on Medium. I'm going to go on LinkedIn. I'm going to go live on Instagram. So you begin to prototype some pieces of content of whatever you're trying to share with your audience, and then you test it. And you test it by asking, what emotions is my story going to evoke? And for me, the emotions is always, content has to be insightful. It has to teach something that nobody can Google, right? It's because it comes from my lived experience. So insightful, inspirational, and personal, it's kind of like the magic space for me in content. And when I thought about the depth of vulnerability, how far do I go? I began to test that content. I went far at times, and I have to tell you, the more vulnerable that I got, the more viral my content went. It was incredible.
Wow. Say that again. I feel like people need to that.
It's like a tagline. I guess it is. So yeah, the more vulnerable I got, the more viral my content went, because people began to see the layers of who I was. When I showed up as Miri from Microsoft, if I always showed up Miri from Microsoft, people eventually go, okay, it's Miri from Microsoft. But if I showed up Miri being a mom and having an issue with a teenage boy, we all have that. We all have teenage, problems and mom issues. And so that's a thing. And so, there is a threshold, by the way, and you decide that on your own. Basically, there's an engagement limitation you give yourself. You're like, hey, I'm going to go this far. I'm going to share this story. People will ask me, Miri, I want to share a story about, a very, very vulnerable moment, abuse possibly when I was a child, but I don't want to go there. I don't want to expose myself or the abuser, right? And I say, well, that storytelling allows you to create something. It allows you to create a different time frame, use different characters to tell the story. Ultimately, the message is the same. You're teaching insights from your lived experience. You don't have to expose anyone. That storytelling is ideation. You can set it up in another time frame, in another geographic location, and it could be fictional characters, but ultimately you're delivering the story and the insights, and people are receiving it, and it doesn't make it any less authentic.
Wow, I love this so much to unpack regarding. I just love how smart you are to apply design thinking to storytelling. I never thought about it. It's only mainly in the startup space, right? Like, this is absolutely brilliant. I have lots of follow-up questions based on this. But first off, I want to show this comment from Natalie. Again, thank you for joining us live. Yes, we need to have courageous discussions about bullying in the workplace. And I assume even, especially in the tech space, right? And ladies, we must do better. I so agree. And thank you for being vulnerable to share your story. So here's another great question from Michael. Thank you for joining us live. So he asked, this is actually one of my questions. Do you feel like that building your personal brand is more difficult in a larger organization? And you work for Microsoft, which is a huge brand, right? It's a global household brand. So how do you manage that? But you still have this very strong, I have to say that I feel like your personal brand is even stronger than the Microsoft brand.
Thank you. Yeah. So thank you, Michael, for this question. That actually does come up a lot. It's really about leveraging the organization's platform, not becoming the organization's platform, right? So I'm Miri at Microsoft, and that's a part of me. It's not defining me. If I'm not at Microsoft tomorrow, I'm still Miri. So it's really enabling the aspects, the other layers of who you are, and allowing people to see that the insights that you're learning at the large organization, it's really your experience. It's really your insight. So you get to take that with you, and you get to share that with people, and that becomes part of your own lived experience and your inspiration, if you will, and your thought leadership. So it is this idea of leveraging the platform you're at, and really when I say I'm mirroring Microsoft, people turn heads. But then when I say, hey, I've been learning this at Microsoft, and even more because they want to get curious about who Miri at Microsoft is and what she's been doing. But then I have this careful balance of showing that personal aspect of me, where my content, it's mixed, right? So you'll get some content about Microsoft, you'll get some stuff that I'm doing there. I'll talk about, things that I'm learning there, but I'm also learning about being the mom of a teenager, right? That's a life learning. And so I talk about that as well. So people begin to see these other aspects of who I am, and it's not conflicting, it's complementary. And I do recognize organizations now more than ever are being more flexible about this idea of you building your brand outside of the organization, because you are a person outside of the organization, right? So it should be complementary. I would say, and I would caution everyone who's really thinking about leveraging your organization's platform, Michael, if you say, hey, I'm Michael from such and such, and that's how you're going to go out to the world to talk about your thought leadership, understand the rules and the engagement guidelines on social media for your organization. Microsoft it's very open with this idea. We obviously work for the brand, and we are empowered, to represent the brand, obviously. But there is a balance that we have to create always, and so adhere to those guidelines because obviously you are representing the brand.
I think that is really powerful. I think that is also makes a company like Microsoft so attractive to many people. Because when I was working in academia, I definitely don't have, or I didn't have the autonomy, the freedom to show up, like talk about things, because I feel like I'm representing my organization, especially when I talk about the problems in education. You are lucky that you have this incredible organizational culture to support you. And I think that is a great role model for other organizations to copy, to follow, because how has you showing up online as Miri, how has your personal brand benefited Microsoft? Do you mind sharing something with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So last year, actually, I was given the award of top ten influencer at Microsoft, and I was
Wow.
floored. I was, when I got that email, I was like, "Are you kidding me? Top 10 in a company that's got 150,000 employees?" I had no idea. So we obviously use the employee advocacy tools, and I do share content. I mean, we have so many great news happening all the time, so many great things happening, not only in my immediate space, but organization wide. I mean, just Microsoft is just such a cool company. I love it so much. And so, there's so much content to share, but I don't always share everything that's Microsoft. As I said before, I have this balance of personal content, inspirational, and insightful. And so I found it very odd that I got this award, that I became a top 10 influencer. And I realized, again, this influence and your persona and your brand, it's really people tune into the curiosity of you as a person. And so when that happens, the platform rises as part of you, and you're able to create that influence and that thought leadership. So it's a care for balance. But if you do it well, it is so successful. You're able to find the niche space of becoming a thought leader, because only you have that experience, right? You're the one living that. You talk about your own experience. I mean, I can't even imagine the stories that you have. You're already sharing some of it. What if we did that more? I mean, we're talking about spaces, we're talking about limitations, we're talking about being a woman in tech, being a woman in education. Not only, I mean, being a woman is hard. Can I just call that out? In general, no matter where you are. So those are things that it connects us. And so we have to really be intentional. Intention is important.
I love that. And what a great answer. What a great answer. And congratulations on getting the award. That is amazing. So I'll bring this back, because this model is really, really powerful. So let me, so for the first element, empathize and empathy, you actually, you shared like 3 different types of empathy, which I really, really love. You talked about cognitive empathy. You talked about emotional empathy. You also talked about compassionate empathy. And that's actually the first time where I heard of the 3 different levels of empathy. Can you please kind of share that with us?
Yeah, 100%. So I mentioned before in my story, and you said that I was really smart, and I was like, no, I'm not smart. I was dying. I was like, I was going to get fired at Microsoft because I wasn't delivering any stories. Had been enrolled for 3 months in core services engineering. Nothing was coming out of me. I was stuck. I was like, yeah, I can do the job. I was like, no, I can't do the job. And so I was actually finishing my master's, and I was taking a UX and a design thinking course. And I was like, what if I start submitting stories, branding stories, and with this approach? So I began to plug in the empathy, define, ideate, prototype, test, and this is what I came up with. So this is actually what the book is about. It's my own learnings and how to leverage design thinking to tell stories and brand yourself. And so empathy was really daunting. So once I figured out what I was going to go do, then I was like, oh crap, the first step is empathy. I'm not empathetic at all. So I'm like, how am I going to do this? And so I began to research more. And as you said, there's 3 levels. The first one is cognitive empathy. It's this idea that we are, basically we're looking at our audience and saying our audience is human, reminding ourselves at the cognitive level they're human, whether your audience is a potential customer, existing customer. In my case, it was these young women in tech, reminding myself that they're human. Why is that important? Because we can detach ourselves real quick, the story, from our audience. We don't make them part of the story, and they're an active part of our story. You have to remember that people take your brand and go with it. People take your story, and once it lands, they go with it, and they own it. They own your content. They consume it, and it's theirs. And so empathizing with them and kind of reading the room real quick and going, how will this content land, especially in today's time? I mean, we have to really pause for a moment and just read the digital room and be empathetic to our humans. The second level is emotional empathy, as you called out. Emotional empathy is this idea of not only is my audience human, but I'm human, we're human. So I'm stepping in from a branding perspective. This is a vulnerability factor. How vulnerable am I willing to get with those humans so that I can connect at that level? I have a goal, right? We all have a goal when we network, when we brand ourselves. We have a mission. I mean, that's the hope, that we all have a mission. Beyond the mission, how the strategy of you connecting one-on-one and being memorable, being inspirational. Maya Angelou said it best, right? And people won't remember what you said and what you did. They'll remember how you made them feel. There's an intention that we have to create. So emotional empathy sets that tone where you step back and not only go, hey, my audience is human at the cognitive level, hey, wait a minute, I'm human too. I can show up imperfect. I don't have to filter myself all the time. I love filters. I use them all the time, but I can show up unfiltered once in a while. And so I can show up human to my audience. And as I said earlier, the more vulnerable I get, the more content, like the better the content to my audience. And so that has always worked. I've tested it over the years. And the last one is, as you called out, compassionate empathy. Compassionate empathy is the deepest kind. It's definitely the hardest one for me, I'm going to admit. My kids call me cold and ruthless. I say, what is the problem with that? I'm like, you're complimenting me, thank you. I don't know what the problem with that is. But for someone who's not an empath like me, it's a struggle. Compassion and empathy is being actually empathetic to yourself. It's you checking in with your own emotions, reflecting on them. I think we're being called to do this more and more, especially through the last year we've been through. In everything that it's involved, just pausing for a moment and just reflecting. That reflection kind of enables us and kind of sets the tone in our brain to remind us, man, if I'm feeling like this, maybe my neighbor's feeling like this, maybe my audience is feeling like this. And so that really helps us become cognitive empaths and, of course, emotional empaths.
I love them. Like, they're so good. And I wonder, like, can you give us some like examples of some of the stories? I'm curious about the vulnerable. If you remember some pieces,
oh gosh,
perform really, really well. That demonstrates.
Yeah, so a few years ago, I would say maybe 3 to 4 years ago, one of my friends passed, a close friend of mine, and she passed very, very suddenly. So I grabbed the first plane. I was in Seattle. She was in Florida. So I grabbed the first plane and, from SeaTac Airport and traveled to Florida. The flight is usually very early in the morning, so like 6 in the morning. I think I was a little bit in shock. I think I was a lot in shock at this happening. I just didn't know what happened. I didn't have all the details of how she passed. It was very sudden. And so I was in shock. And I remember I travel a lot. So, I have TSA pre-check. And so I went through my TSA pre-check, and they had just installed the conveyor belt where you have, like in LA, where you have the trays to put in your luggage and all your stuff. So at the TSA checkpoint, because they had it on the other side, but they had just installed it there. So I was almost on autopilot, right? It was 6 in the morning. I'm in shock. My friend had passed, and I just kind of went through it and put my sweater or my jacket on top without putting it inside the actual tray. And I remember someone started yelling, but I heard them really far away. And I was like, it was like they were far away, but they were also close, and I could hear them. And then I realized, like 30 seconds in, they're yelling at me, right? And so it was this TSA agent going, "Do you speak English? Do you speak English?" And I came to, and I looked at him and I said, "Yes, I do." And I just broke into tears, right? And so, the supervisor came. It was like a scene, but I didn't mean to make a scene. I was just like in shock, and because he was yelling at me, and I hadn't realized that he had been telling me to put the jacket in the tray. I was just not there. And so I got to the gate. I boarded the plane, and right before I boarded the plane, I was just in the state, and I posted this scenario on LinkedIn. But my message was actually, we've all been that TSA agent where we're hurried. We want to just make sure we're doing our job efficiently, and we don't know what people are going through on the other side. That was the message that landed. And so I turned off my phone and landed 6 hours later. And when I landed, my post had gone viral. I had TSA actually calling me to apologize, and people, like, it was like 80,000 views in like 6 hours. And I was like, oh my gosh. And people were just commenting, and just went crazy. And people had taken the post. It just went everywhere. People had taken many, many different avenues to that story, which really taught me, people, when our story lands, people take it. It's out there. So you have to consider those avenues. You have to empathize with your audience to say, how many angles is the story possibly going to have, especially in a charged environment? So that was a very good lesson for me.
Wow, that is so incredible, and also encourages us to share and stories like that, to use the platforms that we already have. And also, you are such a master at crafting stories, which means that you're such a great copywriter. Like,
yes,
if this happened to another person, this person can just kind of report it, right? This is what happened. The post probably will not likely to go viral. So from the copywriting perspective, like in terms of crafting, engineer the stories, like can you share some tips with us? Because I have been following you on LinkedIn for quite some time. You have gone viral for quite a few times. I just love how you share stories. It's like it's different. It's like you are indeed telling a story, but it's not a very dry post, kind of like linear. This is what happened. So give us some tips regarding, you know, like story.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
stories. Yeah. So, you know, a story has a basic arc, right? So all stories follow the arc, the basic story arc. You have the exposition space where you're going to, you know, expose, like, you know, set the tone, set the, you know, where the character, the setting, basically. And then you have the rising action where you're building the character, what they're doing, you're introducing new characters, you're kind of building the plot there. Then you have obviously the climax. Usually it's contending conflict point in the story of some sort. There's a conflict, there's a problem to be solved, there's something that's going to happen, there's a character shock of some sort. And then you have the falling action. It's basically what happens, the result of that climax, and what is, you know, what is the character doing or learning from that climax. And then you have the resolution. So something happens, you know, what happens to the character? Do they learn a lesson? You know, are they transformed in some way? There are 8 basic story structures. So we have the story arc. Yeah, and then there are 8 basic story structures. And I can share that maybe later for you can post it online. But basically, you know, it's stories like the monomyth, which is, you know, it's also called the mountain, which is like a very dynamic type of storytelling where you're just kind of rising real quick, get to the climax and drop it. So a very moving story, very dynamic. You have something called in media res, which is Latin for in the middle of things. It's when you start with like the very climax, you know, my best friend died, and people go, ooh, and then you kind of go around and, you know, you shock your audience and then come back around and tell the rest of the story. There's many ways, 8 basic ones, but I always say, don't stick to the basic ones. Somebody built that. Somebody created the hero's journey. That's another one. It's also called the Lion King, where there's a transformation to the character. They, you know, there was someone that grew somewhere, and now they have this new life or this new transformation, this new journey. Build yours. You know, it's your story. You can combine them. You can build new ones. This is where design thinking steps in. I've been able, you talk about, you know, how I tell stories. I've been able to really craft this more and more and get better at it. I'm not a great storyteller. I'm just a practitioner of storytelling, where I design every single time. And I'm always thinking, what can be done best? What did my audience like? What did they like about that one story? So I took that example of the TSA story and I began to dissect that. It's research. I mean, it's like people are giving me, they're talking to me, and that's the research. So I think I had to really dissect responses, where it went, how it went, where were the angles that I didn't consider. And then I realized, wow, I can do so much more with this. I can do more with that. I can do more with this. And I began to test it. So in design thinking, you test. Your stories are not necessarily fully, you know, fleshed out. You give yourself permission to just test and say, hey, is this where I'm going? Is this the direction I'm going? And people will respond. I always think in my experience, the result of a good story, the benchmarking, is organic reach and engagement. That means people are going to organically, you know, connect with you and share that story and engage with you because it impacted them. So if you're getting that from your audience, do more of that.
I really love this. Is really the essence of like design thinking, how you are constantly testing your audience. And you mentioned that at least like 10 times so far in this interview, you know, like testing your audience, nurturing your audience, testing your audience, sharing ideas, trying different ways. I mean, what works for you may not work for me, may not work for people who are watching this live. So it is so important that we apply that design thinking, you know, those 5 elements to constantly, you know, test, ideate our ideas. So I really love this. I really love this. Great. So here is a comment from Lance, you know, talking about referring to what you shared earlier. Joining us live from Australia. Thank you so much. Referring to what you shared earlier, Miri, regarding, you know, being responsible for the company, what you are seeing online. Yes. And I really hope that more and more organizations are going to be like Microsoft to allow people the autonomy and freedom, because employee advocacy, we're also doing PR for the organization. And here is another great comment from Michael. He said that he really enjoyed your chapter. Oh, thank you for getting a copy of her book on immersive storytelling. And has your thinking changed? You originally wrote it.
Great question, and thanks for reading. Thank you so much. I'm so honored. Yes and no. So, the technologies, when you write a book and you're writing it, 2 years before it's published, obviously when you're speaking about technology, anything can happen and anything can change. What we've seen in what we're entering the post-COVID era, and as we have seen a real force of digital transformation in sectors that we actually did not expect them to go so fast. Education is one of them. So private sectors and public sectors that were forced into this digital space because of this global pandemic. I really believe that now, that acceleration will be even faster in the post-COVID era. So when you're thinking about immersive storytelling tools, such as apps, that, where you're able to become part of a story through an app, through a hologram or HoloLens idea, there's going to be a lot more in that space, I believe, that we probably didn't think it would happen as fast as it's going to happen. So yeah, I think there's an opportunity here for immersive storytelling to take more of a space. We're seeing, of course, like right now, video, what everybody's doing, it's video, but that people are going to get tired of that immediately. Like they got tired of photos, right? So what's next is this idea where we're able to kind of bring you into my space somehow, and that technology is definitely being worked on. So we're going to see more of that, and I don't know what that looks like, but it's exciting. I think we need to be prepared for what that will look like. When you think about vulnerability, when you think about, I was talking in the book about 360 video. That's not a thing anymore, because now we're just kind of, so these are, of course, and I do talk about it, and I'm like, this is probably not going to be relevant when by the time, this publishes. I did say that. But the technologies that we were seeing back then as trends, what we do need to see it's the trend, not the actual technologies, where this is going. The demand of customers is, I want to get in your space. I want you to bring me to your space. How are you going to do that? And it's no longer, we're waiting to be invited. It's demand. It's like, you need to invite me into your space before I decide to befriend you or buy from you or consider your product.
Yeah, like everything you share is so true. It just reminds me of Mark Schaefer. I don't know if you are familiar with his work.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, he has come to my show for quite a few times. He talks about being invited into the conversation and how our customers are actually our best marketers. So which is kind of what you are talking about here, and it's really, really important. Yeah. So yeah, he got the Kindle version.
Oh, thank you. Whatever works,
whatever. Yeah. Again, I want to remind everyone, if you catch me live, so let me share my screen again. If you catch me live on Amazon Live, which you can get a copy of directly, if you click here, the first book that I featured is Miri's book. Just click on it. You can purchase an e-copy or physical copy, however you want to do it. You can get a copy of her book. And to join me live on Amazon Live, just enter classroom without words.live, and then you will be redirected to the Amazon Live page. So we are wrapping this up. What an incredible interview. And as an educator, I have to ask you this question, Miri, because you are the global head of internships at Microsoft. And I work with students who are constantly looking for internships, especially an internship at Microsoft.
Yes.
So when you guys are looking for interns and or maybe even hiring people, what are some essential skills that you are looking for? Do you care if they do have an online presence like you do? Do you actually search them on social media? Do you care if they actually have a digital footprint or online presence? So share with us what matters when it comes to hiring those interns.
Yeah, great question, and I'm so excited. By the way, look out for a post on LinkedIn. I'm gonna post something soon welcoming our interns. I'm just so excited. Intern season is here. They're gonna get started in May, so we've been preparing. My team just this year. I mean, they killed it. They kill it every year, but this year is just. I watched them. I sat back and I was like, wow, I have a great team. Like, what an incredible delivery of work they've done. I mean, they've done so much. They're working night and day to deliver this experience. So we're really prepared, really excited. Our interns begin and start May, and they go all the way through August. So just to set the tone here, we do offer global internships. This means all over the world, there's an opportunity to be an intern, become an intern in every part of the world. So if you go to Microsoft Careers /student or university, you get to see all of our available spots there. There are some internships that are served at 12 weeks, others that are 2 years, depends where where you are and the location, the offering will be different. Also, the technical ability or the if it's a business internship, the actual I lost my train of thought. The actual attributes that you need to have, like the hard skills, basically, are different, and they'll differ by role. So you have to kind of look and see what's available. But when you talk in general about what we're looking for, we are looking for diversity, and we're looking for diversity of thought. And so it's really, you talk about, do we see what they do in social media? Yeah, of course we do. We're looking for people who are showing their demonstrated passion. You know, we talk about people saying, hey, okay, show me passion. Well, how do you show passion? If you say, hey, I'm really passionate about coding, then demonstrate that. How much do you talk about coding? How many coding camps have you gone to? How many coding, coaching have you done? So really, it's about this idea that you come in and you showcase that, you demonstrate that passion somehow, and you're able to see it. We also look for core values, right? So at Microsoft, we exist to empower every person and organization on the planet to achieve more. For me, I always give this example, my personal example, of how you can actually integrate your story, your personal story, back to that origin story and your branding into that question. We do ask the question, hey, why Microsoft? Right? That is a question, hint, hint. We do ask that question. Why Microsoft? And so we get great answers. The typical answers, well, because I love Microsoft, such a great company. I love what it's doing for the world. I want to be part of that. Okay. But what if you said something like, I come from the slums of Venezuela, which I do, and I understand empowerment at a deep level because, for me, empowering myself to come to this country as an immigrant, to grow, to build my brand, to rise to the top where I am right now so far, and accomplish the things that I've done, that's empowerment. And so I understand empowering, and I want to take that same empowerment, align with Microsoft's empowerment, and go empower the world. Right. And that's just from my story. And so I'm giving these nuggets of lived experiences and core values that align to the culture of Microsoft. So learn the culture, learn the values. There's a lot of information out there about Microsoft and its culture and values, and see how you align. And the reality is, if you don't, you probably shouldn't be applying. You know what I mean? So that's the thing. It's like, do you really believe what we're about? And do you really want to be a part of that? I'm sorry.
That's such a great answer, because so many kids, they apply to join a company because of fame, ranking, name, but doesn't really
not a good answer.
yeah, but I love how you just literally apply, finding our story and apply that to answering those questions, so that you don't show up as another generic answer. I love Microsoft, blah blah blah, but actually you add your personality. I also love how you shared earlier, Miri. I demonstrate, right? This is the show me economy, right? Don't just tell me, but actually show me, showcase skills. And I love it. What a great answer. I love here, talking about the future. And Lance was talking about Twitter Space audio, which is similar. I don't have Twitter Space. Do you have Twitter Space?
I've been invited. The thing is, I have to be honest. I got into this train on Clubhouse, and there's just no time in the world. I'm just like, how do people do this? And so I actually created a club, and it became a thing. And now I feel responsible for delivering, there. And I'm like, I can't get into everything. So you have to choose platforms. And I'm a personal believer. I mean, I just don't have the time. I really just don't. And so I would love to be everywhere. I can't. So I choose the platforms. I'm typically on LinkedIn, on Twitter, and on Instagram. And then for actual spaces type thing, I am on Clubhouse, because I created a club there where I talk about storytelling. So no, yes and no. I've been invited. I just haven't done it yet because, it's 1,000 things happening. So, but
but that's I was actually surprised, before I know more about you, I thought this is what you do as a full-time job. It's running your personal brand, having a company. I was like, duh, you also have actually a full-time job.
You have a full-time job.
Right? You have I think it is so important to choose and prioritize, but you are doing such an incredible job, I don't have a full-time job. I feel like I barely manage to show up on LinkedIn, and I don't even have a full-time job. I only run my own thing. So that's great.
That's a full-time job. What you do is more than a full-time job, So yourself out there. You do a whole lot of amazing things. And I think it's actually, this is relevant conversation. I know we're almost at time, but it's also your brand. It's part of that. It's like, again, I'm Miri at Microsoft, but I'm also all these other things. And so I have to demonstrate that. I can't just talk about it, right? So how do I give my energy? Time and energy are important. And how do you position yourself? We all get 24 hours. And when you look back, what have you done for yourself that matters? That's really important. And so that's priority. That's priority. Yeah, I skip a couple of Netflix shows a night because I'm on after work doing my own thing. That's hustling, but I don't mind it because I'm building something. So I always tell my boys, don't be a consumer, be a producer. Produce something that you're proud of later on.
Yeah, I said something similar, just like right before our live, I give a talk. I said, don't be a consumer, be a creator. So I think it is so important.
Oh, there you go. You said it better than me. Don't be a consumer, be a creator. Perfect. That's the tagline.
Yeah. We got quite a few taglines here. I really love it.
Yeah,
So
I know.
What an incredible interview, Miri. So share with us, where can people learn more about you? I have your LinkedIn here, and share with us, and where can people get a copy of your amazing book, which I absolutely loved and enjoyed reading. And my husband and I were actually fighting to read this book.
You're kidding.
I'm not kidding. He's in data science, and he was like, I need this. So no, I need to read this course.
I did write it for data scientists and developers in mind. I did. That was also part of my audience there. That's funny. My husband, I don't think he's written my book. I mean, he's written my book. I'm like, I don't think he has, honestly. I'm like, I asked him and he's like, yeah, a little bit. I'm like, what's a little bit? Like what, the preface or something? Terrible. I shouldn't be putting him out on blast. He's wonderful, people. I love him so much. That's the only wrong thing he's ever done, not read my book. He's perfect otherwise.
I hope he's not watching us live. I hope he's not watching us live. He will feel hurt.
I love you, honey. People can find me on LinkedIn. I will give you a caveat. I get so many emails. I do eventually respond them. So if you want to shoot me a note on LinkedIn, I will get back to you very, very soon. I also plug in a responder. So if you want to get to me sooner, go to mirirod.com, send me a note on the website, contact me there. That goes to my email. And so I'm faster there just because LinkedIn can be very overwhelming. The algorithm is just heavy for me I get so many messages. On Twitter and Instagram at Miri Rod. There you are. Thank you. You're so good. So there you go. That's my handle for Twitter and Instagram. I will warn you on Instagram, and that's solely dedicated to my women in tech. So I talk a lot about women empowerment. I show up all feminine, all the things. But of course, if you want to continue to follow me and plug in there as well, you're more than welcome. Twitter is more the sassy Miri. It's the tech audience Miri. So you'll find a lot of content there about Microsoft and things that we're doing there.
Incredible. And where can people get a copy of your book?
Yes, of course, online on Amazon, as you noted, the brandstorytellingbook.com or mirirod.com will also lead you there. So mirirod.com, my website, you will have a plugin for my book and why I wrote it. Actually, there's this backstory to that as well.
Amazing. And thank you so much, Miri, my inspiration, my role model. I'm also a first-generation immigrant, so I just love your story. Such an inspiration.
You are to me. Thank you for all you're doing. As an educator, I want to honor you. I want to you are so important in people's lives. It was a teacher who changed my life. My 9th grade educator, Mr. Tony from ESL, I didn't speak English. He changed my life. He changed my schedule. He put me on a path that I would have never, been on had he not believed in me. So what you do changes people's lives. And I'm more than grateful and honored to be here with you and your company and all the impact that you're doing. You're just a remarkable woman.
Oh my God, I feel like we can just end the show like that.
Thank
you so much. Yeah. I thank you so much, everyone in the live audience, for joining us live. So there's a time change for our episode, but everyone showed up. I'm really, really grateful. And next week, we're going to go back to the original time, which is 5 p.m. ET. So thank you so much for being here, everyone from all over the globe. Make sure that you guys follow Miri and check out her book. I will see you guys next week, same time, same location. Bye.
Bye.